how to get students to care about history. Well, that's a tough sell sometimes. I don't think anybody can get anybody else to care about something. You have to care about it yourself. It has to come from within. I want to talk to students about why you should like history and how to like history in two ways. One is for those who think they might, maybe someday, like history. And my other comments are more practical comments for all students, but especially directed at those who will never like history and who are determined not to like it. In terms of the content of history, what are we talking about? We're talking about the story of human beings. History is the long narrative of men and women and children. Don't forget children in history. We often do, but they're an important part of history as well, especially as we discover more and more about their lives. This is the human story. Do you want to know what it means to be a human being? Look at the past. What has it meant to be a human being in various times, various places, various civilizations? There's no single definition of what it means to be human. That in itself is complicated. And that definition of what it means to be human is changing. Technology is only one of the reasons that it's changing. There's a bit of analysis for you. We have not only made our lives easier with technology, we've not only facilitated communication, but we've blurred the line between life and death. We're altering the very definition of what it has meant to be human for 1,000 years. You want to know what it means to be a human being? Look at what it has meant to be a human being in the past. History is the stage on which humanity parades itself. It's the only stage we have on which to study ourselves, to study our fellow human beings. We don't know the future. The only thing we know is the past. The future is unknown and unpredictable. We only have the past. It's on that stage that we see the human drama unfolding. We see human actions completed. We can contemplate those actions and their significance. We can look at human error and folly, and also the things that human successes. We can gain a perspective on the past, on the present, on our own time, on ourselves. History gives us that, or we can take it from history if we study history carefully enough and long enough. It gives us perspective. It gives us the ability to make judgments about the past and about the present, about ourselves. We always have an eye toward the past, but always an eye on the present as well, to see how we stack up against the past, where we've improved and where we've fallen behind. So I think that for students who are inclined in that direction, who are interested in the majesty, folly, and mystery that is the human panorama, the human drama, history is the best place, maybe the only place to start, and maybe the best place and the only place to end, because history encompasses all human activity. Everything has a history, and everyone has a history. You are historians, whether you know it or not, because if I asked you, tell me the story of your life, where would you begin? You would begin in the past. Even your bodies are historical. They're unique combinations of genetic material from your ancestors. So you are walking, breathing, living history.
You have to understand that history, it's not just something from the past. You need to maybe look for ways, how does it impact you? Sit down and be like, well, is anything in this class, does it have any connection to me? Does this event or this person remind me of something that happened to me? Would I have handled this different? I think you have to stop making it so impersonal and bring it home to you a little bit. I think history is a little bit easier to do that than the other subjects, because you can always find someone or something, that you might connect to, or something similar that happened to you.
Well, to try to get them to care, I try to find a way to relate the subject to them as much as possible in a way that interests them. Like, let's say this is a science person, this is a person who's really into biology and chemistry. Now, of course, it depends on what kind of history they're taking. If they're taking, well, let's say, hopefully, like 16th or 17th century European history, which is personally one of my favorites. Scientific revolution happened during that time. So if I was lucky enough to get that kind of person in that kind of time period, I would, try to approach it in that type of way, like, talk about the scientific revolution initially, even if that doesn't particularly pertain to what they're, the assignment they're asking me about at the moment, and then try to use that to kind of get my foot in the door, like piquing their interest, and then try to segue back to what they're studying about.
I go back to the cause and effect relationships and how history does repeat itself. You see like recurring themes all the time. And they're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Okay, and it makes it a little more bearable.
Now, for those of you who are unimpressed by that explanation, or who have no interest in understanding humanity, but find yourself compelled to take a history course, here's what to do, I think. Here's how to get through it, and here's how to benefit from it. You may learn some things in spite of yourself about the human story, but you can still learn some things of value. What does history teach? What skills does history teach? Well, many disciplines you can substitute for history here, but if you find yourself in a history course, use it. Historians, as we've been talking about, manage large amounts of information. We sort that information out into smaller, coherent units that make sense, that we can make sense out of, and we explain them to others. If you learn that skill in a history class, you can transfer that skill to almost any occupation you undertake later in life. If you go to work for a company and your boss puts a 600-page document on your desk one morning, says, I don't have time to read this, you need to read it for me, you need to pull out the most salient information that I need to present to our board of directors and tell me why it's the important information. If you can read and analyze that document, if in word, written, and spoken, you can present that material coherently, you can show the connections, you can make connections, you can lead others to see connections, you can draw out the significance of all of this information that is in this document, your boss is going to sing your praises, probably promote you and give you a raise. You will have marked yourself as a valuable, perhaps an invaluable employee, someone who, as they say, is going places. Where did you learn it? In your history class. Even if you hated history, you can learn how to manage information, how to organize information, how to make sense of information, even when it seems incoherent, how to draw connections that others don't see, and how to present that information to an individual or to a group, even when they don't have the knowledge that you have. You can make it clear to them. You can guide them through it, you can make them see what's important about it and why they need to pay attention to it. You can do that in writing, you can do that with speaking. All of those skills are available to you in a history course. So history can be valuable, even to students who don't like history and don't want to like history. If they're forced to take a course, they don't have to just muddle through it. They can actually use that course to learn, develop, and refine skills that they can use later in life in areas that have nothing to do with history. Long after you've forgotten your history course, you can still take those skills with you if you approach the course in the right spirit and if you know what to look for in the course. If you go into that course with the right attitude and the right spirit and you're looking to develop skills that you can actually use later in life, you're still getting an education, even if you don't remember the course or any of the content that you were supposed to master.
I would have to think about that in the way I always thought, because for me, math and science were always my hard classes. So I taught myself with those subjects, it's something you have to know, and it's got to have some kind of importance. And my attitude, if I had a good attitude about those classes, that goes a long way. If you go in there from day one and you're like, I hate this and I'm not going to do good at it, then you're going to zone out during the lectures. You're going to forget that you do have the ability to take good notes, and you're not going to ask for help, which is the most important thing, because you just already assume you're never going to be good at it. So I think you have to have the right attitude.
No matter what I do, if they just cannot stand it, I mean, the best thing I could do is just try to give them some study tips in terms of, how to take notes, breaking down resources, just trying to make it bearable. I've never met anyone who has had that amount of hatred for history that I can't ever find some kind of way to interest them.
And then people that I just can't sway, I'm like, well, you don't want to fail this class, so you have to do the work. You have to push through it. Otherwise, you're going to have to retake it, and you're going to have more history, and you're just going to hate it even more.